to see so many people. We're just saying across so many different sectors as well. So this is going to be really interesting this morning, hopefully. Are we ready to start, Claire?
Yeah, let's crack on.
Let's crack on. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, huge welcome, everybody, to have a really good crowd of people from all different sectors joining us for a conversation around disability and adjustments is always really meaningful and impactful for us. Just to introduce myself, and then I'll introduce our speakers and our running order for this morning. As we've got quite a lot to get through, I won't hold you for too long. So I'm Kate Headley. I'm the founder of and currently CEO of the Clear Company. Have been for 20 years. I'm also the founder and chair of the the Recruitment Industry Disability Initiative. You'll see the statistics of our influence, 2 million people. We estimate we're influencing year on year across recruitment allies and disabled job seekers. So really proud of that and celebrating that 10 years of that at the end of next week. So really big week for us. And this webinar is actually part of that programme because we're introducing 2 of the past winners of Recruitment Industry Disability Initiative Awards, who are kindly sharing their case studies with us. And actually, individually, ClearTalents and Lloyds are sharing their individual case studies. But in fact, looking back over the winners, they were one of the first winners jointly for an emerging talent programme at Lloyds, Mark, which will have been way before your time, but where they took adjustment provision from 0 to 100 requests in one cohort of emerging talent. So I'm sure we're going to get lots of really good top tips today. It's a really important time for us to be having this conversation. We've got the biggest employment gap in disability for certainly in my working life. We got it in progress from 2013 and then it dipped in COVID, and it's continued to sort of fluctuate since, and this year's not been a great year. So it's really important for us all to connect as organisations on what can we do to make this challenge achievable for organisations. What we're saying on this webinar today for everybody is this is a preventable situation, and it's within your gift as employers to change the face of disability employment, to change the experience of disabled colleagues and allies of disabled colleagues across your organisations. And I'm going to let our speakers tell you much more about that. I don't want to be a scaremonger, but this is the year of high profile cases around making adjustments, with organisations recognised for doing some of this stuff around disability and diversity really well. And there were particularly adjustment cases. So it's still the hardest nut to crack. Where I think it lies, and that's why I put my back and weight behind it, is that it's good intentions versus impact in this particular dialogue. So when we talk to organisations from the Clear Company or through my RIDI hat, I'm also Disability and Access Ambassador for the UK government, we regularly get the response, we've got this sorted. So the question we're going to be posing to you all today, and some sort of things that we're going to make you question your own minds, are, what do you mean by sorted? So, for example, sorted isn't when somebody asks for a adjustment, we can put it in place. Sorted isn't, we've got a line on the website that says if somebody wants to ask us, we'll respond. Sorted isn't, we need everybody to disclose their disability so that we can then focus on that label and provide adjustments accordingly. None of that means you've got it sorted. It's a much bigger challenge than that, but it's entirely doable. And that's what our speakers are definitely going to be sharing with us today. I don't want to steal any of Robin's thunder, but some of you will know the reason I'm chairing this is because about 13 years ago, Robin Christopherson, myself and some other like-minded people felt we could do this better, and we all invested personally. I remember 2 Christmases of writing content and professionally in getting a platform off the ground that would make this easier for employers and prove our case. And at this point in time, the snapshot window today, that platform's providing adjustments for 75,000 individuals across the world. So that feels exciting to the point of emotion, if I'm honest. But what I'd like to do now is just move on to our speakers, because they're going to give us much more practical solutions for you. So if we could have the agenda up, please, Claire, if that's possible. So I'm going to introduce you to Mark Lomas, who's Head of Culture, Talent and Communities at Lloyds of London, who will tell you the Lloyds of London story. And I'm not going to spoil that by sharing any of it in advance. I'm also really proud and feel very privileged to introduce Kate Blackford from the M&D Association. It's just phenomenally rewarding when you've invested so much of yourself in something to have, you know, one of the most high profile disability organisations that's doing the most phenomenal work feel that we're doing some good for them is I have to say, a real privilege. So welcome, Kate. It's lovely to have you. Robin Christopherson, you'll all know, MBE, world-renowned expert in adjustment provision in accessible technology, and he's devoted his entire professional life to making life more accessible for disabled people. So he's got a lot to share. And then our very own James Chade from the Clear Company will be sharing the fact that actually some of the things we need to do to make this work well are translatable across the broader management agenda. And then James has very kindly offered to facilitate Q&A for us at the end, and we do welcome questions. Appreciate that's more difficult on a webinar, but do feel free to pose questions. We'll answer as many as we can and answer others subsequently if we haven't got time. So thank you for your patience. Without further ado, I'll introduce you to Mark.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Lomas, Head of Culture, Talent and Communities at Lloyd's of London. And I'm going to take you through our journey, not only with ClearTalents and workplace adjustments, but how that's been a really key factor in enabling us to become disability confident leaders. And really that is focused on changing the conversation from disability to adjustments. And I'll talk through how we've done that. So let me start off a couple of years ago, if I can, in 2022. Can we have the next slide, if possible? And the Lloyd's Corporation had started its journey on disability confidence. Around 2% of our staff had declared or disclosed a disability within our HR systems, and we just brought in ClearTalent as a tool to help us with that. I think the key thing that ClearTalent enabled us to do was have the organization managers and individuals focused on what adjustments they needed to perform effectively in the workplace. And it changed the conversation for us quite considerably, because it meant we were able to evidence to our staff that actually putting in place adjustments is not a problem, and we are positive about that. We were able to demonstrate that we will put in adjustments that help people perform effectively. And as an organization, we were able to track when adjustments were being put in place, how quickly managers were accessing them, and how effective those adjustments were. Over a period of time, that built a great deal of confidence within the organization. And that had another effect, was that people started to fill in the HR system more and actually disclose more on the HR system. So today, when I kind of look at our Workday records, disability is around 11% of our staff base, and yet still a higher proportion of people have asked for adjustments within the ClearTalent system. And what that is telling me is that over time, it has bred real confidence in the organization's ability to put in adjustments, B, the ability to be positive about it, and C, evidence back that we are doing it. As we've kind of grown with ClearTalent, it's been really important for us to engage with our staff network. So we have an overarching network called Lloyd's Together, and within that, a disability community. And that's enabled us to ensure that we are thinking about all aspects of putting in place adjustments. What does that process look like? From the moment someone fills in their ClearTalents profile and maybe requests an assistive technology assessment, to getting that assessment, to ordering that equipment. And our network has been absolutely key in making sure that user journey is really very effective. We've had ClearTalent in the UK for about three years now. And this year we decided to roll it out globally. And so we rolled it out to 8 of our country offices, including the USA and Europe, where we have the biggest population of people. And that is about providing a consistent global experience and the ability for us to manage workplace adjustments just as well in the UK as we do elsewhere in the world. And for us, it's really important because we are a global organization. We want to have a really consistent colleague experience. And ClearTalents is enabling us to do that around disability impairments and adjustments overseas. Putting in place those adjustments and having ClearTalents also meant that we were able to identify where we needed to address accessibility issues in our office environment. And working together with our disability network, our disability community, we're able to produce guidance on our which is available to everyone that wants to come to the Lloyd's building, which sets out all the key features around access and accessibility when you come into our environment. Again, it's really important in providing that kind of consistent experience and giving people confidence. And we have learned a number of lessons along the way. Probably the first lesson is that it is an ever-evolving landscape. It's never once and done. I think the second is apply a continuous improvement mindset. Be constantly wanting to iterate the user experience using your people to do that. And 3, that transparency really does build confidence. So being able to go back to your colleagues annually and say, these are the amount of adjustments we put in place this year. This is the impact they've had. That really does build confidence. And for us, that has certainly resulted in a kind of continuous cycle of improvement and confidence, and is a really key part of us being disability confident leaders. So I'm sure you're going to hear from a lot of the panelists today on really practical aspects of making workplace adjustments come to life. But for us, it is absolutely key to one thing, and that is enabling everybody to perform at their best.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. Lots of really good insights. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. I've got some, so I'm sure lots of other people have got some as well. Conscious of time, so we can ask questions at the end if that's all right. So if we move on to our next speaker, which is Kate, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. My microphone's been a little bit temperamental, so that's good. We're off to a good start. Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Kate Blackford. I'm the EDI manager at the Motor Neuron Disease Association. It's brilliant to hear about how much success Lloyd's have had with inclusion passports, and I'm here today to share a little bit about why we've chosen to partner with ClearTalents and to provide inclusion passports. So full transparency. In terms of timelines, we're very new in this process, actually. Not like yourself, Mark. We are rolling out passports to all of our staff in Q1 next year, but we've been working with ClearTalents for probably 6 months or more now in establishing how we're going to do this, and we're really excited to see how that's going to progress, how it's going to help us support our people and our organisation over the coming years. But I really wanted to share a little bit about why we've chosen to introduce inclusion passports at the M&D Association, and why we've chosen ClearTalents to help us deliver on this. So I suppose to start with the why, and I imagine it is the case for a lot of organisations that kind of go down this road, we have noticed very low reporting rates, disclosure rates for disability and long-term health conditions internally. But even though we know from everyday conversations and anecdotal evidence that this probably doesn't reflect people's lived reality, and we think that, traditional reporting categories haven't really helped us. For example, the legal definition of disability is quite broad. However, not everybody that is covered by that characteristic is going to identify themselves in that way, for example. So particularly, we had a really great session earlier this year around neurodivergence, and we implored people to speak to HR about neurodivergence, if that was the case for them, if people were affected by a neurodivergent condition and let us know. However, when these people then reached out to us and we asked, are you happy for us to change your categorization to disabled on your file? We had kind of, well, I don't identify myself as disabled. That doesn't fit how I feel about myself. So no, I'm not. And we felt that gap really was telling us something about how people share their needs. We also really wanted to strengthen the way that we're handling reasonable adjustments. Kate, you mentioned at the start that this has been quite a monumental year in terms of case law, and there's been some very high profile cases and incidents and changes. And as many of you will know, adjustments can be requested in a lot of different ways. They can be very informal, it can be in passing, sometimes in writing, sometimes through managers. And we were experiencing quite a lot of inconsistency about how we were acting on this. And this was causing understandable anxiety for colleagues, but also for our managers who just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And so we established from that we really need a safe, single point, reliable process that will support our managers and our staff equally. But alongside this, with our broader inclusion work, we're not just looking at how we can encourage openness about health conditions, so be those, physical, neurological conditions, but we were also thinking about how can we encourage people to be more open broadly around things that help us just to understand them and be their whole selves at work. So, things like caring responsibilities, religion, loads of different areas. We'd long heard about inclusion passports. It's not a brand new concept. Many organisations have had a lot of success in cultural shift through introducing that. So it kind of felt for like the right step for us culturally too. And I think most importantly, it really aligns with our values and our mission as an organisation and as a charity, because and like I said, perhaps this is the most important thing, is that the nature of the work we do, for those that don't know or haven't heard of the association, is that we are a charity that supports people affected by motor neurone disease, which is a really, really cruel and brutal rare condition, almost all of whom, people that are diagnosed will experience permanent disability and significant barriers. And we spend our days, day in, day out, championing these individuals, fighting for better access for them, fighting for their rights and providing support. So when we kind of looked at that, it doesn't feel right for us to not hold ourselves to the same standard internally. If we're championing accessibility and dignity for the community we're serving, it kind of was a no-brainer that we need to do the same for our own people internally. So that's kind of the why it's so important to us. Why ClearTalents is kind of another thing that I was considering. So, we set off on this work, and at first, being completely candid, we thought that we were going to build something in-house and it was going to be really straightforward, really easy to do, and it was going to take a few months at best. But actually, once we unpacked this and what that would really involve, so, AKA managing some really sensitive personal information, ensuring that's kept securely and safely, making sure people are able to change them regularly, keep them updated, and supporting colleagues through the process, it became very quickly clear that it would be a far larger undertaking than expected. So we kind of came back to the drawing table and had a think. And I'd heard of ClearTalents actually through other HR professionals in my network, and I knew that they had a good reputation. And so we decided to kind of think about it properly and get in touch with them. And we trialed the platform for a month. And what stood out to us straight away was just how easy, how intuitive, how straightforward it was for our people to use. We loved that it was dynamic and that people could change their passport anytime. They just had to log in and as frequently as they needed to. It's accessible. We loved that the managers have a different end, so that we're making sure that actions are being carried out. And we thought it was fantastic, and it had given us a level of confidence that we wouldn't have been able to achieve by trying to make something ourselves, frankly. And we were also very taken by how I think Claire is on this call. Claire Jones has been my main point of contact. But I was really taken by how bespoke ClearTalents were able to make it for the needs of our organisation, for our tone of voice. So responsive, so accommodating. So needless to say, we are moving ahead now with the full license. We are in the process of soft launching this with a select group of our staff across our different various EDI networks, and we're having great feedback the whole way through. We are also thinking about implementing the bullying and harassment reporting tool too, but that's something we're going to think about next year, as it's going to obviously need a bit more of a risk managed implementation, and ClearTalents have been absolutely fine with that, completely supportive of doing it in this phased approach. So like I said, early days for us, but we're so excited to see how this is going to help us support our people and the organisation over the coming months. And it really is more than a system for us. It's going to become a really important part of the organisation, to help make sure that we can truly understand our people, and I think that's invaluable. Our charitable mission is rooted in dignity, empathy, removing barriers, and we're really confident that inclusion passports through ClearTalent are really going to help us to make sure we're living those values internally and not just with all the external work that we do too. So apologies, I'll take a breath now, but just a whistle stop tour from me around where we're at, and so excited to continue the good work. I'm so grateful to have found ClearTalents as well to help us deliver on it.
Thanks, Kate. That's just a really interesting story, and it's just thanks personally for sharing that what seems easy isn't when you get into the depths of it, and actually it is all about the end result of dignity for all, and making sure that we do right by everybody in our organisation. So it's with enormous pride that hearing that story, quite frankly. Robin Christopherson is a world-renowned expert. He's going to give us some broader view around making adjustments, the whys and wherefores, proactivity versus reactivity, and hopefully sharing some of those gorgeous golden moments of where actually putting an adjustment passport in place means you learn something about a colleague that you've been working with for 10 years and just didn't know, which is just glorious when that happens, and you can therefore resolve their adjustment profile. So I'm going to hand over to you, Robin, if I may, and then we will move on to James. Thanks again, Kate.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Thank you, Mark and Kate. Absolutely brilliant. So yeah, hi guys. The challenges and the impact of effectively managing workplace well-being. So hopefully my slides are up. Just to let you know, I can't see, so I'm going to be listening to my notes as I go along, and I'll say when to advance the slide. So let's start with encouraging sharing. We know what a challenge that can be. So how should crucial workplace well-being data be collected? Well, the wrong way is in an unsupported environment where employees must put themselves out, single themselves out, and where workplace adjustments aren't discussed, and where processes are ad hoc and unclear. Such processes fail because they often rely on an individual or a very small team to manage the process. And it also expects a level of expertise on a wide range of workplace adjustments from that team or individual. Without good management, organizations fall into mismanagement, missed insights, and costly missteps. Missteps that lead to legal action, as seen in the recent Capgemini ADHD and British Airways anxiety-related cases, as Kate alluded to earlier. The right way: every employee is regularly asked about their needs. The process uses language in terms of challenges or what's important to them, i.e. the social model, and not questions about disabilities or diagnoses, i.e. the medical model. Such an holistic, proactive approach is often referred to as an inclusion passport, as we've heard already. So let's look at the impact of such a process on individuals and on organizations as a whole. Next slide. Sorry. So here's a recent real life example, as Kate alluded to. So this is a company that we've worked with to put such a proactive passport approach in place. So an employee was prompted to update their inclusion passport, and they realized that they could highlight how their caring responsibilities had changed. His wife's ongoing illness was impacting his ability to get to work on time. What was agreed? a later start time that really helped with his well-being and greatly reduced his stress. Such a proactive process, where an employee is prompted to explore their needs, is absolutely key. It surfaces needs early and avoids mismanagement and a situation reaching crisis point. The key is that it needs to be a wide-ranging well-being approach, covering everything from anxiety to allergies, from burnout to window blinds. Otherwise, you can't reasonably ask all employees to create their passport and update it on a regular basis when any of their circumstances change. Let's look at another quick example. Next slide. A home worker struggles with long back-to-back video calls, and the workplace adjustment was simply to turn the camera off during internal meetings and all external meetings where appropriate. Also, shorter, more frequent check-ins rather than extended calls, and identifying dedicated focus times during which time no meetings are scheduled. This is another simple, free workplace adjustment that has significantly improved this employee's working life. Next slide. Let's look at the impact upon an organization as a whole. AbilityNet adopted an inclusion passport approach in 2018. Turnover dropped from 31% to 13%. Wow, that was high. And sick leave halved from 5.5 to 2.6 days in a matter of months. There are many organizations moving the needle in this way, based on an holistic, supportive approach to workplace well-being. I should also highlight how important it is that the solution is not only supportive in how it encourages people to share their needs, but that it also provides the required expert recommended adjustments that form the basis of the conversation between the line manager and the employee. Next slide. Let's finish off by looking at the larger scale impact of getting it wrong. So rising sickness absence. On average, it's 4.4 days per employees per UK employee in 2024. There is also a significant impact on productivity of poorly supported staff. This contributes to low morale and presenteeism, where people feel pressured to be in work when they really shouldn't be, or longer hours when they should have really knocked off. Also, high staff turnover. Replacing staff is really expensive. That's around £8,200 per employee, or £12,000 per senior roles. And of course, there's a much broader human cost associated with this as well. Legal liability. The average UK Disability Discrimination Tribunal award was £44,500 in 2023-24. And finally, brand damage. Mismanaging diversity can lead to loss of trust and customer loyalty. And we'll leave it there. I hope that's given you a brief picture of the impact that a proactive, holistic approach to the management of workplace well-being can provide. As one such solution that encourages sharing and provides those crucial expert-tailored adjustments, ClearTalents is currently helping many thousands, as Kate mentioned, over 75,000 employees worldwide. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thanks, Robin. I mean, as always, as somebody who's partially sighted, struggles on webinars, but how you keep up with the audio is just absolutely amazing to me. But anyway, and we've worked on many a spreadsheet together, and you're much better at it than I am, and I can see some bits, not all. Thank you for the speakers so far. One of the things that's come through is, as well as your process, as well as your systems, as well as that consistency and oversight, we do need to make sure that our managers and our allies are empowered with the right information and the right level of confidence to have the conversations and actually solutionize when we've got to that stage of the inclusion passport. But James is going to talk to us about the work that he does with managers and how important it is to give those skills at management level and not assume just because you've got a good process in place that the managers are going to be confidently able to deliver it. And I know we've got quite a few people on this webinar, some of whom I've spoken to before, for whom this is a continuous challenge. So really looking forward to your input here, James. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. So yeah, I think for me, what's really interesting about this topic is how often we are actually having disability conversations, and maybe we don't realize, or the person that we're talking to doesn't realize, and I think that's a really key point around confidence. And one thing I love about the inclusion passport approach, and I speak personally here as well as someone that has one, is actually putting yourself forward to have this conversation is very different than this is part of the regular conversations that we have. So I think this idea that am I having more disability conversations than I think I am? I think most managers that will be true. Another thing I always say is really, really important for managers is that you are never out there managing alone, right? You're going to have peers that are doing it, and you're going to have the support of the central functions of your organization. And one thing that managers always need to know is what are the relevant policies, but also what's happening in other areas of the business. What can I tell my team or tell the people that I work with to give them that confidence that, that they can ask for these adjustments and they are very doable and there is process in place. And this next point, I think, is so key, that sometimes when you ask for an adjustment, and as I mentioned, I've asked for adjustments, I'm neurodivergent myself, have dyspraxia. You can find yourself after asking for an adjustment saying, oh, thank you so much. Thank you for your kindness. Well, this is a policy, right? It's not your manager doing you a favor to put an adjustment in place. It's company policy. And also, as we've spoken about, it is going to increase company productivity, reduce sick days, reduce the people leaving. So managers, I think, are really well served by saying, I'm not here to do you a favor and create that kind of paternalistic dynamic. I'm here to enact the brilliant policies that are in place. So for some of you on the call, I'm sure you're thinking about enacting those policies. And for some of you, it might be how do I communicate the policies that are there? And I think, the Clear Talents platform helps so much. The other piece as well, something that Kate and I have discussed a lot, is managers can fall in. I've been a manager in the past. You can fall into becoming therapist, amateur doctor, business, psychologist, all of these things. You're not actually there to do that. And actually knowing where that boundary is one of your key tasks for this. So I think being informed of all of the policies and processes, knowing when to bring in support, I think is one of the key skills you can have. And that's after a conversation, but also approaching a conversation. So often, Kate and I will work with HRBPs, heads of HR, DI professionals, and one of the messages we always get is, I wish people would talk to me more semi-informally. It's not an escalation to HR to just ask for some advice or to run a few things past someone. So, knowing when to involve others is key, whether that be informally or actually enacting those processes. Thank you. And, just a couple of tips that we have around this. When you're having these conversations around adjustments, around disability, the key tip that I've been given is be accurate, be respectful. Sometimes we fear naming or discussing disability. But actually, if you keep in mind this line, be accurate, be respectful, avoid negative language, avoid language that's rooted in the problems. This person is stuck in a wheelchair, this person suffers from, that kind of language. But also one thing that we sometimes see as an overreaction maybe to that is people adopting quite patronizing language. Oh, aren't you wonderful? Aren't you doing a brilliant job? You've got this clever little device that you use. And, again, that can be quite disempowering for somebody that just wants to talk very professionally and accurately about an adjustment. And one of the key things I think as well is, whilst doing that and whilst being very proactive and very positive about the impact of adjustments, we also don't want to diminish the impact a disability could be having on someone. I know we mentioned earlier that disability is broad. It could be a chronic illness that causes a great deal of pain. It could be a disability that means that, walking to an office is a real challenge. Let's not diminish any of that, whilst also saying to people, you will be able to succeed in our business. We will make that possible for you. And one more slide from me. And just to say, we're going to do the Q&A after this. So, you know, get your questions ready. But something I like to say, and Kate mentioned this in my intro, I always like to talk about how what we do for certain colleagues will help everyone. So inclusive teams, all of these things I mentioned will benefit your colleagues with disabilities and with adjustments, but they'll benefit everyone, right? Inclusive teams make flexibility part of the way they work. They understand that everyone's different. Rigid working styles are unlikely to benefit anyone. In that context, an adjustment that means you have to arrive late, you know, as Robin's example, all of a sudden it's not you're arriving late, it's, well, yeah, we work flexibly. You know, we have a responsible attitude to time. And I always say this, and tell me if this makes sense, but we are used to changing things for people. You know, everybody has individual needs, whether it's, well, I know that certain person is no good until they've had their morning coffee. And actually that person can't drink too many coffees, you know, and I'll make them a tea. You know, we are used to adapting to people. And I think if you can make that normal outside of disability conversations, you know, we're a team of people, let's say we're 10 people, we're all different. All of a sudden being that person that has an inclusion passport and asks for an adjustment, that's not as hard if people are different. But the other thing that inclusive teams do, and I found this really interesting working in this space, is we don't make assumptions. You know, there's a great phrase we talk about with neurodivergence. For example, if you've met an autistic person, you've met one autistic person. We can't generalize and you know, assume lots of other things. And sometimes we've noticed that our clients will go, oh, okay, I understand this now. I can put that adjustment in place for that person. Or I'm finished. I'm done. I've worked it out for that person. And it's never that. It's adaptable. People are different. Things change. So I love the point made earlier about asking that question regularly. You know, make it part of your weekly catch-ups, or maybe more, you know, your check-ins that maybe are more formal. You know, are the adjustments in place? Is there anything we can shift on your inclusion passport? And then a final thing, which I think is really important, is inclusive teams play to people's strengths. Speaking personally, the best adjustment that I can have is that I spend most of my time doing the things I'm good at and the things that I enjoy doing. And I do have adjustments and support for the tasks that are essential for me to do that I find harder, but I'm spending 90% of my time in my comfort zone, achieving, getting praise, getting good feedback, so that then when I do need that support and help, you know, it doesn't feel hard. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm asking for all these favors. So keep that in mind for everyone. And lastly, something I'm sure you all do, but inclusive teams are respectful. You know, inclusive teams don't say, why are they getting something I'm not getting? Or why is it different for them? Or what's going on with that person? You know, inclusive teams don't ask those kind of questions. You know, they make the assumption and have that trust that the manager is doing right by everybody. And although I might not need an adjustment or extra support today, I might need it another day, you know, or I might need it for another task. So just in conclusion then, what I'm trying to sort of add is just that thought process of how this turns up behaviorally. And I think it's the confidence that comes from there's really good processes in place. This conversation is not terrifying to me. I'm probably having this conversation a lot more than I realize. And actually everything I do to make it easier for my colleagues with disabilities or colleagues who need adjustments, because I do take the point earlier, a lot of people don't identify as disabled who are having adjustments. But if I'm doing all of that stuff anyway, this is just part of human diversity. This is just one of the things I do as a manager. I don't have to be a doctor. I just have to confidently make my team feel comfortable and enact my company's processes with confidence and empathy. I'll stop there. I'll come back to you, Kate, for any final comments on all of our speakers, and then I'll be ready for the Q&A. So get your questions ready.
Thanks, James, Robin, Kate, Mark. You know, I've been doing disability inclusion, working in it for a long time, and I still learn every time we have one of these sessions. So thank you all for the golden nuggets you've shared today. Really appreciate it. I think just to add to or reflect on the comments that you made at the end there, James, is that, you know, we can't assume that our managers are experts in having confident conversations with individuals. And every time we invest in, you know, their evidence-based hiring program, their leadership programs, if we build in these behavioural elements that James has referred to around confidently having those conversations, then that translates back into the disability landscape as well. So I just wanted to land that point. My final point always on these things is when I'm talking about adjustments specifically, well, there's two. One is regularly ask the question, what's the limit around adjustments? And the response would be, adjustments should be limited only by your imagination, because as James says rightly, they're different for everybody, and we regularly come up with something new and maybe a little bit quirky, maybe even a little bit fun, but interesting use of what we've got around us at that time, which is new, and our imaginations allowed us to go there with the individual. So that's one thing that's absolutely key. And the other thing, if you take nothing else from this, is we don't need to know diagnosis, we don't need to know why or the cause, we need to know impact and then solutionize putting that adjustment in place. And that would be my reflection on what I've heard from everybody today, which for me sounded very practical. So I'm hoping the audience has got lots of things from it. But we've got experts in the room who've given up their time graciously today. So I do hope we've got some questions for them. So I'll step off and let you take that forward, James.
Thank you. And we've got a few different options here. If anybody wants to raise a hand, and then I'll come to you and you can ask your question, vocally. We've also got the Q&A function or the chat function. I'm comfortable for you to use any of those. So we've got one question here from Fiona. So thanks to all. Robert mentioned this. As D&I professionals, we use the language of the social model versus the medical model, but how well does this resonate in organizations? Is it helping make positive changes in mindsets and approaches? Well, seeing as you're mentioned by name there, Robin, I'll come to you. So, and then would love to hear from the other panelists. But is the social and medical model helping to make positive changes within organizations?
I think it's absolutely key, and thanks for that question, because it shifts the conversation from a very significant but relatively small group of people with a diagnosed disability, for example, to a much broader conversation around, how can we support our colleagues? And, that level of sharing goes up from single digits in every single ClearTalents customer to around 60 to 65%, which sounds scary on one level, but the vast majority are free and very easily implemented. So, it's incredibly important not to talk about, not to focus on the medical model, which singles people out and is dangerous when it comes to your legal obligations as an employer. Now, that's got some tension with the importance of data and being able to measure things, and being able to collect data on diversity is important too. But this inclusion passport approach should definitely not be a data collection exercise, although it can be incredibly useful in that area as well. I'll let the other guys chip in.
Yeah. Anybody got strong thoughts on that one from the panel?
I think I'll go if you don't mind. I completely agree with Robin. That is the fundamental starting point, because the social model helps people focus their minds on how you enable people, and that is absolutely central to getting the spirit of it right. And when we talk about ClearTalents, and when I talk to managers about ClearTalents, I'm talking to them about, this is how you enable someone to perform at their best. Because at the end of the day, that as a manager in the workplace is what you want people to do, be able to perform at their best. And I think the social model is probably the best vehicle for enabling that mindset shift.
Yeah, fantastic. Kate?
Yeah, I agree with all that's gone before, obviously. I would like to say that I think that the difference in the impact of the social model versus the medical model is just absolute, as Mark's alluded to. So we work with organisations where the medical model is adopted, and that's a what's wrong with you. It terrifies the manager. It labels the individual, and it doesn't solve any problems or provide any solutions. Whereas the social model, for those, I mean, I'm sure everybody on the call knows, but for those of you just in case, is about society disabling the individual as opposed to their condition, medical condition, physical condition, mental health condition, whatever, disabling them, in which case we have an option to correct it to give somebody the right opportunity to do well at work. And that's the impact of that model. And I think the other element of that is the medical model slips very quickly into what I describe as the pity model. Now, somebody with severe visual impairment, if I go into a room and say, I work a lot in boardrooms, the lighting's odd, people are in different places, and I'll go, just so that you know, I am significantly visually impaired, so if you're on that side, I can't see. If I hear an bless, which I regularly do, it completely stops me performing. I have to really overcome that. I'm in a pitying environment where people are being sympathetic with what they see as a medical problem for me, as opposed to, if you could just adjust the lighting a bit, that'd be fabulous. So it's a great question, and absolutely at the core of whatever we do. It sets the right foundations. If anybody doesn't know about the difference in the models, we can definitely provide information on that. It's not semantics, it literally makes a difference. So we've got information on that if you need it.
Fantastic. And I know, Kate, we've had great conversations, haven't we, about the medical model is not wrong when enacted by a medical professional, right? But in workplaces, that's not what we're doing, is it? We're not in that role, as the doctor. So there's another great question come through here, and I'm going to come to you, Kate Blackford, if that's okay. And then Robin, obviously, you can add in from the technical side. But there's a great question from John. Is there usually any criteria in the process to who takes up the passport? What's been your experience with that? I'll come first to Kate Blackford and then Robin, from a platform perspective.
So great question. So for us, like I said, we are at the starting point of implementing the passports. To our knowledge, no, there is no specific criteria. It's certainly for us going to be operated on an opt-in basis, but we're very reassured by the statistics and the data that's been provided to us by ClearTalents about how actually most of the staff that are offered the opportunity and most of the employees that are brought in and given the chance to make a passport, I think they have found that the rates of uptake on that and those who do engage is very, very high. So we're quietly confident that this is going to really be successful, and we're going to have a lot of people engaging with it. Only time will tell, of course, but absolutely we're going to be delivering on an opt-in basis. So to that end, I think that there's no criteria specifically, and I think that's one of the beauties of the platform itself, is that it's not solely about actually disability, reasonable adjustments. It's a massive part of it and very important, but it covers a lot of different aspects of a person's life. Yeah, we're really hoping that if we're able to pitch that right to our people, as we're trying to through this soft launch, that there'll be no reason why we don't have a really heavy uptake from everybody in our organisation. So yeah, hope that's helpful.
Definitely, thank you. And I'll come to you, Robin. Tell us the detail in the platform on this one.
Yeah, so we would strongly encourage every client to encourage every employee to create a passport, even if it's just to say, no, everything's fine here, thanks. But the thing is that employees don't know what what might be useful to them, what, that has been challenging in the past, but, oh, I'm being asked about this now. And the way that the system is set up, it's very top level in some different areas, from communication, travel, technology, your workspace, that sort of thing. But from those top levels, you very quickly drill down, which is why you can get to very specific things, areas that you thought, oh, yes, actually, I have, something quite important to say in this area. So we would definitely encourage people to, at onboarding, and then you'll get a reminder from the system at least annually to nip in and see if everything's still okay, everything, nothing's changed. But definitely you should treat it as a live document as your circumstances change, as your anxiety levels are increasing, or you have become pregnant, or whatever it might be, thinking of transitioning. Go in there and let us know about it, and then wheels can very quickly be put into place. But when you first said that question, I was thinking, does it mean that who's it shared with when somebody shares something? And that's really important too, because that's on a need to know basis, typically, or by default, that's with your line manager. because then they can have that informed discussion, as we mentioned about earlier, based on what the system has recommended and has shared. And if the line manager is in some way not the ideal person, as Kate mentioned, there is a bullying and harassment component to it. Not to cast any aspersions on line managers, but you can then escalate that. You can say, no, not actually to my line manager, but to the central team who will work with it. But it's a very distributed, democratized approach, which means it's infinitely scalable. And those teams aren't overwhelmed. So yeah, I read that the other way. And obviously data protection is incredibly important. There is a very much, there are nuances of access rights to any information on the system. And it's only people that have the right to be able to access it when, for example, it's escalated to a workplace assessment, say, that it will be shared with those people.
Fantastic. So we've got another brilliant question. I'm going to come to you, Mark, as you've implemented this, and then Kate, great to get your thoughts as a thinker and an experienced consultant on this one. So great question from Stephanie. Loving the point around we don't need to know the diagnosis. All we need to know is how to help you, but it can be tough to change mindsets. People have old-fashioned views. They might think of adjustments as costly. They might think of a negative impact. And actually, therefore, diagnosis or, a doctor said this can be impactful. What can we do to prove, and that feeling like you have to prove it? What can we do to tackle this? How do we give employees confidence that, there is a different thinking? Mark, I'll come to you.
Right. I mean, I think that has been absolutely central to our approach. And if I think about, if I boil away all the motivations of the line manager, what does a line manager want in the end? Boil away all the complexity. They want someone who's going to do a good job. And that's the starting point for the conversation. And that's what ClearTalents enables you to do. What you are going to get from the tool and what you're going to get by using it is a clear understanding of what the individual needs to enable them to perform at their best. There's a clear approach to it, there's a process behind it, and that does enable a change of conversation. Also, that does also mean that you can go back and have discussions with the individual after a 8-12 week period, whatever might be reasonable. We put in place this adjustment. Actually, it's taking care of this element or supporting this element of performance, and it's an iterative process. In terms of cost, again, the data that you get through the program and through the platform, allows you to evidence that. A vast majority of adjustments that we experience are fairly costless, and many are low cost. In fact, we have an approvals threshold, which is a couple of £1,000, which would come through to my team. And on a handful of occasions, and I literally mean a handful of occasions over what is now 4 odd years, we've done an approval of that sort. The other thing that I would add is managers and HR teams and organizations also have to think about managing risk. And the risk of not supporting an employee means they're not performing properly. The risk of not making adjustments is that you fall foul of legal requirements. And therefore, this tool helps both those elements. It decreases risk and it increases effectiveness of employees. And I think when you talk to managers in that way, it really does help. There are also parts of the platform which can give managers education. I've been told this. What does it mean? So I think my belief is by using the tool the way it's designed, it naturally changes the conversation. And that's what it's done for us at Lloyd's. It's just changed the conversation from disability to adjustments.
Yeah, fantastic. I can see as well that, exactly as you say, that actually the momentum of it working is changing the conversation. Proof. Kate Headley, I'll come to you. I know you spend a lot of time influencing and persuading on this.
Yeah, and again, it's a great question, and I love it when we have the opportunities to respond to these. And I've written down a few words, but one of the things that if I'm working with particularly a leadership board or an exco around this topic, and there's this fear it's going to cost a lot of money, well, we've got the data that it doesn't, so that's fairly easy pass. And then the other one is, but what if somebody's lying to us? I mean, that's fundamentally, if we're asking for proof, we're fundamentally saying we think you're lying. You know, that's kind of where it's going, or I need that evidence point. And actually, we know we've got so much data to share that one of our challenges as organisations is to get people to talk about their disability. You know, if there's the odd person, I hope there isn't, but if there's the odd person who is thinks that an adjustment of some, you know, getting a coloured card over their screens or something free of charge is worth pretending to have a disability about, I think that's so unlikely. And I have conversations with boards, and we talk about this freely, saying, actually, our bigger problem is how do we get people to ask for these adjustments, as opposed to, we think there might be people asking for adjustments when they don't need them. Why would you do that? You know, realistically, why would you do that? I can see somebody saying, "Oh, taking the mickey." Yeah. So that, to Mark's point, really, it's around changing the mindset from, is this about trying to catch somebody out? We have the same in inclusive hiring. Inclusive hiring is like, if you slice me in half, that's what it would say in my middle. And you get this all the time, inclusive hiring. How can we catch that candidate out in this interview to make sure that they're not the right person? Whereas actually the process should be, how can we make sure that we can ask all the right questions so that if they are the right person, we can hire them? And it's exactly the same when it comes to disability. It's having that complete mindset shift of, we've got an individual in our organisation, they're not coming to work to do their worst, they're obviously coming to work to do their best, and there might be something we can do to make that even more productive and better. And the bottom line, in the UK certainly, and other countries, it's the law. So the law doesn't say you need a medical diagnosis to get an adjustment at work. The law says you self-assess and say, this is the impact of my disability or long-term health condition at work, and you therefore, employer, have a duty to provide me with adjustment. That's the law. Okay, assuming that adjustment is reasonable and somebody can still do the job. So if it gets down to it, that's kind of where we're at in terms of the risk factor that Mark's talked about there. So that would be my take on it. But fundamentally, and again, I've spoken to a number of clients and organisations around this. If you've got managers asking those sort of questions, there'll be one of two things happening. One is nervousness about talking disability. That's easily fixable with disability confident awareness briefings, with giving them the right information and putting a support framework. The other is, if you've got an organisational culture that's fundamentally not about trust, then you've got a bigger problem that isn't just about disability. And again, that's not, I wouldn't say that's easily solvable, but it is solvable. And, you know, people like, you know, Mark, who's head of culture, have taken many an organisation on a journey to change that culture so that it's open and the dialogue is there. That will impact significantly on your disability inclusion.
Yeah.
I think that's the end, isn't it? Are we at the end? Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't I'll hand back to you, Kate, for a kind of final wrap up. Thank you.
Well, first of all, huge thank you to our panel today. Absolutely great balance. So thank you all for bringing such a different perspective, but actually meeting in the middle, which was really great. Thank you so much for that. And a huge thank you to everybody who's joined us today. It's a very busy time of year. The fact that this is of interest and you want to get it right, phenomenal. We have got an event at the House of Lords next Thursday. We've got a couple of places we can gift if somebody wants to drop us a line if they would like to attend. Minister for Disabled People is coming, People Management will be in the room, and we are going to shake it up big style around disability. So do let us know if that's of interest. Thank you, everybody. The recording will be available. Please do share it with colleagues. I think this is something you could literally use as a management training programme just from this webinar today. Please use it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. And everybody.